Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have my new friend, Mr. Gary Lashmar, on with us today. Gary, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, man. It's earlier for you than it is for me, isn't it?
It is a bit early. This is for sure in the 2 years I've been doing my podcast, the earliest. I'm not complaining. I'm up anyway, but this is my bright and early podcast as exhibited by the wonderful light that you are experiencing.
You look great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Can you give a quick introduction to the listeners into who you are?
Yes, my name's Gary. So from London, the UK. I've been a photographer for since birth, really. It feels like no, probably from the age of about 9 or 10. I've got my first camera, but I'm 50 now, 52. And I've been taking photographs pretty much full on, like almost like as an obsession, I would have thought, since the age of about 29, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, on and off for years, like I get a new camera and then I wouldn't take photographs. Then I'd take photographs, I'd get into it as a little bit of a mini craze. Then I'd leave it for a few years and I'd pick up, I'd get back into it. But pretty much full stop since the age of about 29, although that's a long time ago now. But in terms of making money from photography and like making a living from photography, it's a little bit more recent. So the last 12 years.
Okay.
So from the age of about 39, 40, I've been making money. I make any money that I do make is made from photography. Yeah.
I fucking love that, Gary. As a person who 2 years ago during the pandemic lost his job, was completely rudderless in what he wanted to do or who he wanted to be with his life. Photography came to me at that point, and it's been the greatest gift of my life since. I've been a full-time photographer for 2 years. I can't say I've made that much money. It's been a slow go, but I'm incredibly appreciative for the journey. I'm 37 in a week or 2 weeks, and sort of a very linear, similar path, which gives me a lot of hope to hopefully be sitting where you are one day, 20 years from now. But talk to me a little bit about your journey. So, you're in your late 20s, and what was it about photography that sort of bit you and made you fall in love with it?
Well, it was. I'd always been. I hope it don't sound pretentious, but I'd always been kind of a little bit artistic in terms of like what I was interested in from a young age. I wasn't very good at those subjects at school: maths, English, geography, history. But I was always into art. So I was always drawing. I wasn't ever that good at it, but it was always a thing that I love to do. But photography, on and off from a young age. But let's get this straight from the outset. Really, in terms of it benefiting me and my growth as a photographer, in terms of getting to the stage that I'm at now, for what it's worth, in terms of my level of how good I am now as a photographer, which is not for me to say, obviously, but it's I would say really let's just say I picked up a camera from the first time really when I was about 34.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really about the age, and basically that's when I bought my first like real camera.
Which was what?
We're still film here though. I'm still shooting film here.
Love it.
So it was a Nikon. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. I remember my friend Stuart bought a camera and I was fiddling around with his and seeing the pictures he was getting. I was just thinking, I can take better photographs than that. Remember, with no smartphones back then, with cameras on, you don't know you don't know you're a good photographer or a terrible photographer or whatever.
Sure.
Back then, there was nothing to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've always got a camera close to hand. And then still slowly though, then I had a camera, put it down for a bit, but I was taking more and more photographs. I'll tell you the reality of it is, it was when digital kicked in, and I had an old Canon Rebel, a 60D. I think I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
And we call it the old Canon Rebel. It was one of the first digital cameras that was kind of um, you could take a half decent photograph with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of those for the next sort of 5-6 years. I was one of those annoying guys at weddings who wasn't the actual photographer, but I was kind of just waiting for the bar to open, really, so I could have a drink. But before that, I would take a whole bunch of photographs. So now you're talking, I mean, still picking up the camera, putting it down, picking up the camera, putting it down, again for the next few years. The age of about 37. Coincidentally, I was at a few weddings. I was at more weddings over a 2-year period than I perhaps would have been the previous 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe about 6 or 7 weddings. Social media was just springing up. Facebook was only 2 years old, 3 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Maybe a little bit older than that, but it was very much in its infancy. And what would happen, by the way, you have to shut me up with these things because I'll just waffle on.
No, please waffle on.
Yeah. So
That's
basically,
the idea.
I would be at the wedding. I'd be at a wedding, and I was also getting into shooting a little bit of video. I've been working for an investment bank for the previous 10 years. I wasn't an analyst. Don't worry. I worked in multimedia.
Okay.
So I had access to equipment. So I got into making like mini short films. Nothing fancy. We never took them to any festivals or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing music videos for bands, friends really. Again, no one famous, just like really sort of
Just to do it.
terrible stuff, really, looking back. I mean, there was 5-6 seconds here and there that had promise, but pretty much it wasn't that good. And then I remember I was shooting these weddings. Definitely wasn't shooting weddings. I was a guest at these weddings, and I'd have the old Rebel, the old Canon Rebel. And I just remember, they'd share my stuff on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered that. I just remember that from this vantage point. And then I was I would give them I would give them the old disc with about 50 images on it as my little gift to them. And then I remember I was at this wedding, and there was this American. Her name was Julia Boggio. I'll never forget her. And she was shooting my friend Claire and Simon's wedding in Richmond in London, just on the outskirts of London, posh London. And it was a kind of wedding that I never usually quite often went to as a guest. I'm working class, and the weddings that I went to, but even later on when I started shooting weddings, I don't shoot the kind of weddings I used to go to as a guest. The weddings I shoot are quite high end.
Yeah.
The weddings I used to go to, it was basically, they were sort of making it up on the day pretty much.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I shot this wedding, and I just remembered, I remember I hadn't seen, there was no internet as such. Well, there was, but it was, some people had it, some people didn't. This was before the kind of Facebook thing that I was talking about. And I just noticed she had jeans on for a start, and she just looked really cool. And I was just watching her, and I was the annoying guy again. But she was I was asking her questions, and she was quite sweet about it. And she was like, oh God, she didn't want to upset anybody. So she was asking I was just twittering away, And then I noticed, and then flash forward I went to Claire and Simon's house for dinner. This must have been about 4 months later. Again, I sent them a little disc, and they had my images up on the wall. And I was like, I was like, let me have a look at the photographs of the wedding. And I saw, they said, well, they said, go on her website. There's a gallery there. Save us getting them down, because they'd bought an album. They just go. So I went on there. And I could see what she was trying to do. So I'm thinking, this is what she was trying to do on the wedding day, but she just can't quite pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I caught myself having that thought. And then I saw what she was charging, and I knew that I'm not the most confident person in the world with anything else in my life, maybe as a father, in relationships, at school, But with photography, I've never had a second voice.
Hmm.
I don't
Which
compare
is
myself.
which is just so
I've never done that.
counterintuitive to
But
most.
it's Yeah, but it's not an effort, John. This is the thing. It's not like people can say, "Oh, wow, how do you do that?" I think it was a mixture of me coming to. I'd been shooting early. I'd been shooting before social. There wasn't a comparison. You'd have to pay to compare yourself to get feedback.
Hmm.
So, and I was too old. I was kind of 38, 39. I didn't really care what people thought.
Hmm.
But anyway, so I'm sitting there, I'm looking, and then I saw, and I, in an instant, I thought, I'm better than her.
Hmm.
And then what I do, I'd never do this, but I saw she had links to other photographers, wedding photographers. I mean, God bless her, I'd never do that. Put links to other photographers on
Yeah.
my website, and it took me to the States. A guy called Sean Flanagan, who later became a friend of mine. Long story, but he was just like he was an artistic documentary stroke portrait photographer who happened to be shooting weddings.
Hmm.
He wasn't like a lot of people who shoot weddings. They just kind of didn't make it in fashion, or they didn't make it in back in the day.
Hmm.
But this guy, he'd chosen to be a wedding. I did a little bit of research when I went home. He'd chosen to be a wedding photographer because that's where the money was.
Hmm.
And I saw that the guys in America and Australia actually were like in that industry. Weddings were 6, 7 years ahead of us.
Hmm.
So I just run with it, and then I left my job. I thought what you were saying about your job. I actually thought of losing your job. It was a bit different for me. I didn't lose it. I planned it, but I thought I'd take a massive cut in wages for a few years. But I didn't. I made more. I made double the money I was making at the bank
Wow.
within 2 years. Within 2 years, which was a surprise. It wasn't any degree of business acumen. It
Yeah.
was just luck.
Hmm.
So the way that I was shooting, John, there was no one. There was probably, well, in hindsight, there was probably about maybe 25, 30 people shooting like that in the country. I saw that 2, 3 years later. But in my immediate, the people that I started to know, everyone was looking to me. So I was shooting weddings for editors of wedding magazines and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so
So you take your street and documentary style and artistic flair and
I'm a street photographer, right? This is how Lynette and I became friends, and Claudette have become, because with the whole street photography thing. My default setting is I'm a street photographer.
hmm.
So what I started practicing from about the age of 38, 39, and not knowing what I was doing. I didn't know about street photography. I hadn't even heard of like Henry Cartier-Bresson then. I hadn't even heard of those him.
Sure.
Um, uh, I was practicing street photography. I'd go out 2, 3 times a week and practice street photography. And obviously now, of course, it's like if your line in the sand is here in street photography, like in terms of your comfort zone,
Hmm.
at a wedding when you're expected to take photographs, can you imagine? Like I was just like my camera's like this close at a wedding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite close anyway on the streets. So if you can push your ear in street photography and really come up against your comfort zone on a wedding, you still want to come up against your comfort zone in that regard, but you're just coming up with magic. You're creating magic.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. That's what I was leaning towards, because what I would imagine is you take your street and documentary eye, right? Your acumen for getting, I call it like the song and the dance, right? So like your acumen for being able to like anticipate how people move, how people interact with their environments in a city setting, and then you're able to sort of implement that into your job as a wedding photographer. So you take that eye, you take that artistic expression, and are able to then flip it on its head for something that would ordinarily be, a very classic sort of day.
Yes, with street photography. Like for weddings, for me, a wedding for me is in two parts. Is it worth going? It maybe dig into this a little bit. So for me, a wedding is 95% street photography,
Uh-huh.
documentary, observational, candid, whatever you want to call it. Um, I always get mixed up with because there's all these terms they have, don't they? So there's documentary, and then they have not photojournalism, all that stuff.
It's all right. Yeah.
It-
I call it documentary and
taking photographs of people without their permission.
Sure.
Just call it that. Street photography. There's another part of a wedding day which is the bride and groom portraits that up until around about 15 years ago were just taken a certain way. They were staged there, and what I did, I wasn't a portrait photographer, but I fell in love with the portrait side of things. So I learned about. I just became so passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've shot a lot of portraits in the last 15 years where the portraits that I shoot, like I teach that, shooting portraits. So for me, I ended up shooting wedding portraits that were kind of a little bit more fashion based and really turning them on its head. Like now, it's a lot more competitive. There's some great wedding photographers out there, you know, and portrait photographers who have come into weddings and that kind of thing. So it went too far. So there was the street photography, but then I had to bring something else to the table, was about nailing portraits, which I've still kind of not done, but it's about moving in that direction. And so for the last 12 years, I'm in and out. I'm never lose my passion for the click ever, whatever I'm shooting. It's photography all the way to the grave for me. But within like genres within that genre, it's kind of I'm in and out of different things. But briefly really underpins everything.
Yeah. You were recently in New York. Tell me about your trip and give me a little bit of insight into what your street photography process is like. What are you looking for? What catches your eye? What is it that you're looking for when you're, strolling around New York City?
Yeah. Well, New York first. I've visited a couple of times before. The first time I was shooting a wedding in Rhode Island, and we hit Boston and then drove to New York, and then, or was that the second? It doesn't matter. So one of those trips was that. Another time was a surprise gift from my ex, Claudia, little Jessie's mum, who you saw in there, and she'd done a surprise gift for me. And I wasn't really shooting a lot of street photography then. The second time, a little bit. The first time I was drinking as well. I don't drink now. I was drinking, so the whole thing was just bars and drinking and pretending we were sort of seeing New York, And then the second time, I didn't really. I was kind of more of a relaxed visit as well because I've just been working and that kind of thing. Shot a little bit of street photography, loved it. But this time was really, and although I went with my girlfriend Katie, it was still. I got a lot of street photography done because I originally was planning to perhaps put on a workshop in New York. But post-COVID, I just felt a little bit, I don't know, everyone would have, I think all my friends out there would have been great with it. I just felt a little bit, it would have been a little bit maybe arrogant doing that. I don't know, I just didn't feel right. And also going with Katie, so we had to, but she knew I was going to be shooting street photography as well, so it was all good. I just, I love New York. Straight off the bat, I will say I find it a lot easier to shoot in New York than London.
Is that like a law perspective? Because I know London's weird about that kind of shit.
No,
right?
the law's fine.
Oh, okay.
The law's fine in London. It's open season in London. You can do whatever you like.
Got it.
Pretty much. I mean, there's private areas, not that many. Canary Wharf. They're even in Canary Wharf, you get away with it, but you might get the odd security guard coming at you.
Sure.
But no, London, in that regard, it's the same as New York.
Okay, fair enough.
I just find in New York,
people don't give a fuck.
They don't give a fuck. I've always got one eye on the fact that I am an outsider, so maybe unconsciously you just give off, and people are easier with it. I don't know. They just sense a tourist, even though I'm a
Yeah.
street photographer and I'm semi-streetwise, because I mean, like, and I will do that in New York. Like, I'm not really. You can sense where you can go and where you can't go, but I just find it. I love New York. I'm a huge movie fan for starters. And remember, we just grew up, there wasn't an English film industry back in the day as such. So everything we saw in movies was New York. So for me, it's like walking onto one massive big movie set,
Hmm.
which never dissolves. Even you're there for 4 days, you still, it's like everywhere you've been, you've seen,
Yeah. I mean,
kind of.
Gary,
Kind of.
I live 12 miles and I still feel that way having been there, somewhat
Yeah.
weekly the entire of my life. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. It's
There's
the
something
people who work.
cinematic about the city. There's something beautiful about it, which keeps me coming back to take pictures.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I met up with Claudette while I was out there, and we couldn't get to see Lynette because she was up to something, and my friend Josh, and not long, we had like a couple of hours with them, and I was talking to him about whilst it's a lot easier, I think statistically, I don't know how to put this, uh, you still got to have your backup because you are more likely to come across a lunatic in
Oh
New
yeah.
York.
Oh yeah. Totally.
But
Now more
but
so than ever.
I didn't, but
Yeah.
I'm always kind of wary, and I just loved it. Somebody said to me the other day, "I want to talk to you about planning a trip to New York, my street photography." And I didn't do any of that. I kind of know that I want to. Well, what I didn't see last time, because there is that as well. I want to eat. I want to eat in this place. I want to visit this place. I wanted to. Well, it was Katie who wanted to go to Coney Island. As soon as
Great.
she said Coney Island, I'm like, wow, we've got to do Coney Island.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
We're in the middle of winter, so that was kind of a double-edged sword. It was great because there was no one there, but also I would have loved to have been there when there was everybody there.
Hmm.
But I thought, it's like being in the Warriors, and then in terms of my approach to street photography, it is quite, it's quite not aggressive, but it's very. I don't shoot from a distance.
Yeah.
It's
I think that's the hardest thing for street photographers to learn is
yeah,
that aspect of getting close. It's a naturally uncomfortable position to be in, like to be able to be invading someone's personal space, whether they are understanding of it or
yeah.
not. But yeah, no, I
You
think.
can't,
Go ahead.
you can't be a great. I'm not saying I'm a great photographer, but you can't. I look at what I consider to be great or very good photographers. You cannot be. You cannot. Or let's forget about great photography. You cannot take great photographs and always be comfortable. You cannot take great photographs and always get a good night's sleep. You cannot take great photographs and not have a degree of guilt.
Hmm. Wow.
You can't. For me, it's like, what am I willing? Like so for example, one of my favorite photographers, not actually his photography, I kind of is for me. Like is Bruce Gilden,
Oh yeah.
but as a character, not so much his photography. I like other street photographers, like the final product more than his. Like I think there's a lot of photographers that I love that if they took on his approach, they'll get a lot better photographs than he would.
Yeah.
Much better photographs.
Yeah.
He's. I think people are attracted to his work because of his process, because
Yeah.
of
Who he
gets up
is.
close.
Yeah.
Like you can be
The
a not
Flash.
very yeah, you can be a not very good photographer, or well, I wouldn't say not. You could be a good photographer, and if you take on a certain way of shooting, like I don't think I'm like in terms of the photographers I know, some of my like close friends who are photographers. In terms of the technical side of it, they'll wipe the floor with me,
Hmm.
but they're not going to get the shots that I'll get.
Right.
They just won't because they're like they just won't. Like I think the degree to which you can, like for example, like people talk about like was it the William Klein quote or or was it? No, I don't think it was Klein who said that, like, if your pictures are not good enough, you're not close enough.
Mm-hmm.
To that effect, which is, I think that statement. I probably said it wrong, but I
No,
hope people get this.
I think that's accurate actually. But no,
Yeah,
I agree. I think that's the hardest thing
yeah,
about street photography is getting that comfort zone and invading someone's personal space. Because as I started as a street photographer, I was 50 mil lens, fucking real far away. Like I was going through the process of creating images where the subject was just far enough away where they didn't really notice me, but I put them in a scene that I
yeah.
thought looked cool because I was too scared to get up there and take a.
Yeah, but it takes practice. Like, and what happens though, John, if you're hesitant, and you can't help, you're always going to be hesitant. I'm hesitant in my comfort zone. But at the end of the day, my comfort zone, I've worked on it. I'm always at the edge of my comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
always. And if I'm shooting for another 20 years, I'll still be at the edge. But my edge, in terms of, like people would say, just starting out, is going to be,
Further.
in terms of my, like I just feel it's not always either. I don't even think it's always like the best photograph is not always close up. It's not. It's not. For me, you use that as almost like a gauge. Like I use that proximity as a gauge of where I'm at. Like, um, I find as well, you can use fear.
Hmm.
Like use fear as a way of seeing more.
Oh.
So what happens? We're out on the streets because it's this fear that keeps us separate. That's what I've seen in my life. It's probably age, something to do with it. Like I've seen, like in my life, well, why didn't I do this? But in that situation, I pushed through, and I had a better time. Like I felt like I remember more. Well, we remember more when we're there. When we're the only things we do remember in our past are when we were present.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't present, that's why we don't remember everything that we've ever done because we're rarely present.
Mm-hmm.
We remember the stuff where we was really scared and when we was really happy. And quite often, the happy things, the adrenaline things, are as a consequence of pushing through fear.
Oh.
So what I do a workshop based on this. It's called the Dare Photography Workshop. I've been doing it for about 10 years, and the whole workshop is set up to support participants to get on the other side of fear. You talk to people about it and say, oh, well, what's that got to do with photography? Well, this is most people see. This is the thing. Like you see, most people were on this side of fear. Yeah, they've not opened. They don't know what's on the other side. They talk like they do know, but the thing is, they've all read the book, How to Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, or How to Be Happy in 30 Steps. But they have no idea. That's all intellectual. That's not part of the deal. Like what I've seen is that let's just bring it down to street photography. There's a person across the street, let's just say where I've been in New York in Greenwich Village, and they're and I can see there's a beautiful light spilling from the to the right of, if I hold the camera up, and and they're dressed, but they just look a little bit like they're in a mood,
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit. They're not necessarily going to appreciate me coming up and taking a photograph. But I don't want to see me, not in this frame. Sometimes I don't mind them looking in the camera, but so I know I need to. If I don't get this shot, I'm gonna be talking to myself for the rest of the day. And it's horrible, isn't it? It is horrible, isn't it? It's like and then you move across. It never gets any easier ever.
No.
You move, and then you get the shot. And how does it feel when you get that shot? It just feels
The best.
yeah. What I've seen then is that everything becomes a little bit more vibrant. Everything, like I see more, like I'm more in sync with the symmetry of life, I suppose. And that's because I've stopped talking to I'm not in my head telling myself, well, I can't do that, I can't do this, I can't get close. It's only temporary,
Mm-hmm.
but that conversation, it's thinking, it's called, falls away.
Yeah.
And then, so one of the things that I do when I'm out shooting I know that I don't go out for long. I'm out shooting in New York was a bit longer because I'm in New York, but like I'll go out in town in London. I don't really want to be shooting for longer than an hour and a half, 2 hours,
Hmm.
really. So I have to speed up that process of being able to see. So what I do for the first 20 minutes is I do scary shit. Like even I know it's most of the time the images are going to be rubbish. No one's going to see them, but I want to get in people's faces a little bit. And because I'm telling myself, oh, don't do this, don't do, and then I wake up, and then I can start working.
All right. So you're going to kind of have to shock the system into being able to sort of like free yourself
Yeah,
to create. That's interesting. You know, it's funny. When I shoot street photography, and Lynette thought I was crazy for this, I listen to music. Do you listen to
yeah,
music,
yeah,
or are you like just completely plugged into the scene? And
yeah. I struggle with that anyway. I mean, I love music. I'm a huge music fan. But even when I'm working at home, and unless I'm editing images where you can kind of, you got to be there, but you can kind of,
mhm.
then I do it. But when I'm out on the street, I've got to be a bit careful, like the way that I shoot. So if I'm in Whitechapel and I've got this, I don't know, I've got a Ennio Morricone track on, yeah, that
Love it.
yeah, yeah, but it could lead me into a false sense of security.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah.
Do you
You're in
know
a
what
bit
I'm
of a
saying? So
dodgy area,
yeah,
and
I
yeah.
feel like I'm in a movie, and then all of a sudden, whereas if I'm not plugged in, I'm more in tune with the heartbeat of what's going on, I
To be
suppose.
fair, so I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'1", 230. Like I'm a big guy, and I don't very often feel unsafe in New York City. You know, it's like people try to
Yeah,
fuck with you. Like I would just scream some expletive at them or tell them to fuck off. You know what I mean? Like I'm not
yeah.
that worried. I have recently been putting the volume of my headphones down considerably because the city's getting a little bit sketchier on a monthly basis,
Yeah, yeah.
which is an unfortunate byproduct of a million things.
Just
Um,
do it. Just do it until it don't work. When it don't work,
You mentioned that you started your career shooting film. I'm curious about your artistic process now. Is it mostly digital? Do you still shoot any film? What's that like?
no, I haven't shot film for years. Occasionally, a few toy cameras, you know, the little Lomos and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I've got a load of those, and I buy cameras. I recently bought a Pentax. It's one of my favourite cameras. One of my favourite English photographers is David Bailey. He shot did this shoot with Gene Shrimpton in the '60s in New York, which pretty much changed Vogue. It was like an awesome. It was like really ahead of its time, and he shot with his camera. And I did have one before, but I broke it. And I don't even remember ever using that, but I bought this recently. Like digital, to be honest, I spent my whole life waiting for digital to come around. Like if I was in my 20s now, I'd probably be shooting film probably.
Yeah.
But I don't miss that at all. I don't really. It is my process is it's about it's about the photograph. Well, the process is, for me it is the way that I shoot. So there is a degree of that, and I love a new camera as much as the next person. But
Who doesn't?
uh, is it laziness? I'm a bit obsessive as well. If I get into shooting film, when I was shooting film because I had no choice, I always wanted to develop. I always wanted to do my own thing. I did a little bit of that at school years ago, but I always wanted to do that. Like like I'm like that. I'm just I have this like if I even if I pick up like a pen now and do a little drawing, in my mind it's going to be exhibited this one day.
No, I like
So
that.
I have to go in the full hog, and to me, partly it's too much of a headache.
You know,
If I get into, I've probably got to build a little dark room, and if I've got to build then I've got, and then it's going to cost. Nah, just stick with the Fuji's.
so yeah. Well, I love Fuji, but I shoot all of my street photography on film.
Oh
I'm
wow,
yeah. I used to shoot primarily 35 millimeter, and honestly, since becoming friends with Lynette, I have been exclusively shooting on my Hasselblad for like the last 6 7 months. Um, and
wow,
it's been a beautiful thing for me from an artistic perspective because my process has slowed so much that the pictures that I'm making are so much more intentional and so much better. And I don't develop myself because I'm too fucking lazy. I have no desire to do it. I go to the lab, I drop it off. 3 days, I pick it up, and it's done. I'm actually, after our conversation, going to go pick up a few rolls that I shot earlier this week. But there's something about the process to me. Like when I initially started shooting digital street photography, first on a 5D Mark IV, bought all the Fujis. I have a big gear acquisition problem where I just fucking buy cameras like mad.
Yeah, that happens when you're kind of starting out as well a lot.
Yeah, I'm
That, that,
very set in my gear ways now. But from personal project perspective, if it's not commercial work, I typically shoot it on film, and it's just for me to slow down because like I'll go to a studio and shoot a portrait session with a couple models, and I'll shoot 2,000 photos, and I'm like, this is just fucking stupid. I got it in 200. Why do I have 1,800 more photos to go through? So for me, it's sort of like enables me to be more concise and particular about what I create because I have to slow down and be more mindful. I only have 12 frames. In that
personality as well.
What's that?
I think it has a lot to do with character and the kind of images that you want to get.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For me, I can't shoot like that. I don't rush anything. I'm always on purpose. But I don't shoot anywhere near as much as some digital guys because of the way that I come up, like in terms of how I just
can only put 100 photos on an SD card.
But like I can like so the way that I shoot, I can't have any thinking going on.
Yeah.
I can't be thinking that like I've only got so many shots. I can't be thinking like that. And also with me, I'm seeing what's going on. I'm not interpreting. I don't interpret anything. Well, I interpret everything unconsciously, but I don't go out with a plan. That can be misinterpreted as, oh, well, I'm trigger happy. But you'd have to see me shoot. I'm not trigger happy. So for me, I think like, so for example, you know that Henri Cartier-Bresson way of shooting photography,
Mm-hmm.
which I respect and I admire. That's not my way of shooting. I can't shoot like that because for me, any picture that I've taken, I've seen it. I'm just trying to recreate what's gone before. I might not think that,
Sure.
but I have.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm thinking that all of my thinking is secondhand, the degree to which I'm present, like, you know what I was talking about earlier about like being in sync with what's going on. Most people don't shoot like that. Most people are in their head thinking, right, where are the photographs? Where are the photographs? Where are the photographs? If they stop having that thought, they would see, they don't even have to go anywhere. There's photographs everywhere, right where they are. But most people are in their head. And what happens is anything that's born of thought is contrived.
Huh.
Sounds a bit heavy.
Yeah.
It's not heavy. It sounds it when you're communicating that to someone who lives in that, oh, that's a bit heavy. Well, that's because you don't know the alternative, which is totally light. There's no thinking, and there's just photographs everywhere. I don't chase photographs, ever.
Do you chase people? Because, like, for me, when I'm on the street, like, I'm looking for uniqueness, right? So whether it's an outfit, a hat, a jacket, a person, just, like, something that is unique, is something that I'll latch onto. But like, what, like for you, because it sounds like you're very intentional in your process, what is it that makes you press the shutter button?
Well, it's definitely not bicycle moustaches and polka dot. Like those are easy. Like I met some guys recently, they wanted to go on a street walk and they took me and they said, well, we're going to go to this thing. There's a colour. There's like a little street thing going on in Shoreditch in London. And people were all dressed up, and I just thought, oh, what's the point of that? I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
Like I'm interested in no, I'm not looking for that drama because that drama is what everyone sees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now I do see that, I do notice that. I'm always moving in the direction of stripping all of that back. Because everything's beautiful. If you're looking, but everything's beautiful. Now, this is the thing. When we're in our heads, we're interpreting, we're like, oh, this is what makes a good shot. That's not a good shot. That's an idea of what a good shot is. For me, most street photography, like I look at it on Instagram, most street photography, I want to sound critical. Hopefully this is an observation, or at least it's taken that way.
Looks the same.
Because I'm the same. I'm the same. I am in my head a lot of the time doing all of that stuff, right? It's just moving in the direction of not doing it. But most of the stuff on Instagram, if I handed the camera to, say, my mum, and I was going out with her, she could have got that picture.
Mm-hmm.
The reality, she just don't bother taking pictures. Like, people think street photography is a picture of a person in the street. Well, it could be called that because it's street photography. But we know what we're talking about when we say street photography. Has nothing to do with it. There's no thought gone into it, or no thought. There's probably too much thought gone into it. Or this is how I should take a photograph. This is what it says in that book. Like, it's very, like, I couldn't shoot film because I'm not good enough. I couldn't shoot street photography and get on film and get the kind of photographs I want. I'm not good enough. Like someone like Gary Winogrand, like, I can edge towards getting his kind of photographs on digital, but never do what he's doing on. Like, my favourite photographer is Don McCullin.
Okay.
Anywhere near his stuff he got on film, I have to shoot digital. I'd never be able. I just, if I was shooting film, I'm not good enough to shoot film. I just not. I shoot digital and pull the wool over people's eyes.
I think you're selling yourself a little short. I mean, I spent a lot of time.
Well, I definitely couldn't. I couldn't shoot my way though.
Okay, that's fair. That's different though than saying that you couldn't.
I'm too stingy.
Yeah, well,
I'm too stingy. Too much money.
Yeah, well, that's different than saying you're not a good enough photographer to do it, because there's no question that you're a good enough photographer to shoot film. There's part of your process that wouldn't translate to shooting film. Sure, fine, but like, skill has very little to do with shooting film, for sure.
The downside of shooting film, though, and I hope it's not negating.
Is I'm broke.
No, the downside of that's that too. But the downside of shooting film too early is that, or maybe not too early. I don't know. Everyone's different. I don't know. I'm making these assumptions, but the downside for me is that I had, because of my age, I had to shoot film.
Mm-hmm.
I got a friend who's a wedding photographer, and he's an awesome wedding photographer, by the way, one of the best in the world. And his name's Fer Juristi, yeah. And he's an awesome photographer who happens to shoot weddings. There's nothing wrong with wedding photography, you understand, but some people have this thing with wedding photography. But he's an awesome photographer, just full stop. But he shoots weddings. And I did a workshop of his years ago, a one-day thing, when I was like way back, about 10 years ago. And I said, Fer, how many images do you shoot at a wedding? And he said about 15,000.
Wow.
So after I did his workshop, I thought, I'm going to do a bit of the first stuff. I'm going to shoot as many pictures as I can, and then the wedding will be found in the culling of the images. Now, this is trying to shoot as many as I could. Do you know how many I shot?
1,000.
2,800.
Yeah.
I shoot at a wedding. I shot a wedding in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, and I did a pre-wedding shoot the evening before, and I shot a whole bunch of street photography for myself. And I shot about 1,400 images for the wedding. My couples get about 400 images,
mm-hmm.
yeah, because I cut it down. And then and then my street photography, whatever that was.
That is, to me, remarkable, because that shows a level of intent for what you're doing that for some reason, when I have my digital camera in my hands, I have a hard time focusing because there's no, I think it's because there's no economic implication to what I'm doing. I can shoot 5,000 photos and it doesn't matter because it's on a fucking card. But yeah, I mean, that's incredible.
There's also photographs everywhere. Mm-hmm. I don't understand it. I don't understand this thing with, like, I have no preference really. Like, I love New York and I feel good because I'm in New York, but I'm not going to get any better shots in New York than I will in London or or even just down the street. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not. But I think I will because and also when you're excited, it's that thing again, John. When I'm excited, I see more. I see more. Like when I'm like in like if you like when I'm at home, like so if you came into my living room at home, you would see things that I've forgotten about years ago.
Hmm.
And vice versa, if I came into your environment, there's stuff that you would have forgot about months ago or years ago. Like you'd notice stuff. What we do, right, as people, even us photographers, like what we do, we go into a new environment, and because we're uncomfortable, we want to make it as familiar to ourselves as possible, as soon as possible. Like you go on holiday, vacation, right? Go on holiday for 2 weeks. Oh, where's the bathrooms? Where's that restaurant? And then because we want to put it in a box,
Hmm.
once we put it in that box, we stop looking. We stop looking. So like in your house, like if you stop for a second now, like and look around, you don't like you can see stuff that you've forgotten about for like months. You haven't even taken into account because we should. That's what we do. Well, as street photographers, we shouldn't be doing that. Or as photographers, we should be constantly moving in the direction of coming from that fresh place. It's difficult. It's very difficult to do. It's what all of those guys spend years sitting in caves, sniffing their belly button, doing all of that stuff, trying to get into that space.
Yeah.
You should come and do my workshop, mate. I'll fast track that. You don't have to be going in no caves. I'll just shot people into it.
I love that. Um, I really do. Talk to me about like how your life impacts your art. I know when I'm going through shit, whether it's a breakup, whether it's good times, bad times, my photography will directly like it will reflect what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
In your own personal experience, how does your mood, how does what's going on outside of like the street or whatever you're shooting factor into your art process?
I'll tell you, one of my favourite filmmakers, a lot of people's favourite director, Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not necessarily my favourite films. Some of his are. At least one or two would be in my top 20, maybe Pulp Fiction. But I remember him saying, like in terms of his writing process, and I think this applies across the board to any art form, is like how you're feeling on that day. If you don't allow that to inform what you're doing, your creative thing, then you're not telling the truth.
Ooh.
That it might be that that's not a thing. I don't want to get too heavy with that. I don't think about that at all, but I definitely don't stand in the way of that happening. Not that I know of. Like I'm sure it does. I've never looked at back at my work and said, oh, on that day I was feeling like that, or. But I'm a photographer. Like there's two kinds of photographers for me. There's the kind of photographer that only ever picks up a camera when they're working. The street photographer Martin Parr, he's like that. He'll only ever pick up a camera when he's working. One of my best friends, my ex, Jesse's mum, Claudia, she really only picks up a camera when she's working. I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not being falsely modest. I'm not. I just can't. I've always got a camera to hand. I don't think there's probably not a time in the last 20 years where I've gone a week without taking a photograph. And especially now we've got these things like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind taking photos on iPhones. I think, and I'm very similar to you. I don't think I'm a good enough photographer to not be taking photographs all the time because I don't think you can get better without practicing your art, right? It doesn't have to be photography. It could be anything. You're not going to become a better musician by not playing music.
Yeah.
So I agree with you a lot. Yeah, it's one of those things where I've stumbled into this super late, not late in life. I'm not that old, but like I've stumbled into this place at a sort of slower rate than most people who fall in love with an art. And in a lot of ways, I think that informs my curiosity towards it, my passion towards it. I think whenever you get an opportunity in life to uncover something that you're super, super into, it's something that's going to be a part of your daily life anyway.
I think the age thing is overrated. Like, I think it's a load of bollocks. Like, I did a workshop in California, and I met this girl, Donna. She came and did my workshop when she was 71.
Wow.
The oldest person I've ever had at my workshop, yes. 71, great lady, the coolest lady ever. Like, she's actually best friends with Johnny Cash's stepdaughter. Imagine that.
That's
Yeah,
sick.
Mylene Carter Cash, yeah. Or very close friends with her. And she did my workshop, and she did her first exhibit when she was 73.
Wow.
Well, we have no idea when we're going to check out.
Mm-hmm.
People, we think, and also, like, I think if you can take a photograph, you can take a photograph. Like, I think a lot of it's to do with confidence. And not confidence. I'm not talking about that fake confidence where, like, walking a certain way. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about being a little bit more comfortable in your own skin. And I think as we get older, we are. And I think, like, for me, remember I said that I've been taking pictures from a young age, but really, it was really age 34, 35 when for me, that's when I picked up a camera, really.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about, it sounds good, or I picked up a camera when I was 12, but really, I've never took a picture properly before I was 35, 36. But I actually think if you're gonna be a good enough photographer, like, okay, it's like this. I don't think I learnt much after the first year of really getting into photography. Like, in terms of how to use a camera, I don't think I learnt too much.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
But in terms of just saying, like, my portraits, I don't think, like, well, just take it out of photography. Like, you think of these musicians. Well, think of the Beatles. When was their best stuff?
The first
Like Paul McCartney's best stuff. I'm not comparing us with Lennon and McCartney. I'm just saying any musician like David Bowie, when was his best stuff? Probably earlier on.
Sure.
So what is it about when you get to a certain age anyway? How much are you really going to learn? Like, I already had a foot in the door anyway, because I'm a massive movie fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd seen so much good cinema,
Mm-hmm.
good cinema. That cinematography went in despite myself.
Mm-hmm.
It just went in. So people sometimes, like I don't know, but there is an element of photography that I fought against this when I first started doing workshops, John. Like, I was just like, I can teach anybody. I could teach people to the degree where they'll even make an half decent living out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one thing you can't teach, and it's you can't really put your finger on what it is. It's just like, I don't know. Do you know what? A friend of mine said once, my friend Pat, he said, do you know what I think, Gal? Sometimes I think photography is about taste, and some people just ain't got any.
Yeah, that's funny. You know what so, like, with regards to the age thing, I'm very mindful of the fact that I'm super young, right? Like, I know I have a lot of life in front of me, barring me not paying attention, getting smacked by a bus, right? I know I've got a long way to go. I think because nowadays so much of our lives are lived for other people, right? Whether it's social media, whether it's fucking the Facebook of things, whatever, it's easy to feel like you're behind in some aspect of your life. Like, I'm not married, I don't own a home, I don't have a wife. Like, these are things that, like, you can look at and compare it to your peers and feel like everyone else is doing it, so I'm behind. So that's what I mean when I say, like, oh, I'm old, I came to this late. I wouldn't
Yeah.
change anything about my journey, about my life. I think everything that I've experienced to date has brought me to this point, to this conversation, to everything that happens to me in the future. Like, it's not a fucking smooth sailing road by any means. Like, fucking A, life is a bitch. Like, it is not easy. Got headaches and bills and fucking all the shit that I deal with on a daily basis. But I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. Like, I'm incredibly lucky that I've been able to find something that I love more than anything else that I have in my life. And I think that that's rare, right? I think it's very easy for a lot of people to go about a life that is very simple, very cookie cutter, very punch the clock, make myself some money, and just not take any risks. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about that fear line, right? Like, if you're not able to jump beyond the veil of pushing yourself out of your own comfort zone, whether it's artistically, creatively, or just in life in general, you're never going to be fulfilled.
Absolutely. The thing is, I'm just going to turn this off to 2 seconds because I keep getting 2 seconds. I keep getting this. Sorry, John.
Yeah.
Quite rude. The thing is, I think as well, and I'll tell you what I have done, John. I got to the age of, I remember it, I was in California, 2015, and I had this experience, and I would hazard a guess there's very few people that I know who I went to school with that have had this experience, where I ticked off every box of everything I wanted to achieve. Everything. I had everything. And it wasn't, by the way, it wasn't some big dramatic downhill thing after that. It was just, but there was an instance of me thinking, well, that was quite, I remember that. I remember that as a pivotal thing in my life. The reason I brought this up as well, I had a discussion with someone about this a few days ago about something that they were going through and about how they feel a little bit behind schedule. And it's important to have goals, I think. Why are we here? It's important to, because you put a line in the sand, it's a measure of, otherwise what's it all about? We're just sitting there flicking channels, aren't we? But for me, it is important to ask ourselves as well, what is it we want by getting what we want? Like so people think like this, all of this stuff. I see it when people come and do my workshops. There was a period where I was shooting like about 9-10 destination weddings a year. So I was traveling all over. And after a couple of workshops of doing that period, I realized that these people, they just see the picture on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
They see that's what they want. They don't, if they knew what that took, they might still want it, but they might not. Because the picture on the beach, that's just a few seconds. It's not that it's not worth it. It's just not what you think it is. I think some people are cleverer than like some people hold on to their dreams and never go for the dream, because I think unconsciously they know. Like, do you know what? The dreams that I've moved in the direction and I've accomplished, I'm glad that I did it, and it was quite monotonous, really, quite boring. Like sitting on the sofa dreaming it up, that feels good. But getting up and doing something about it, quite often you've got to sit at the computer, you've got to get on the train, you've got to meet people. You still got to do the 8 hours a day nonsense stuff, like walking to the toilet, opening doors, all that. It's all still part of you. You're not doing that much different. But you're not. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm at this stage in my life. I was talking about this the other day with Claudia. Claudia, yeah. And she said, and I said, life for me now is a bit of a game, really, an enjoyable game. I don't really care really too much what I do. I'm not really that bothered. Sometimes this kicks in my thoughts and I'm like, oh yeah, if you put on this workshop in there, and then I sit and I think, actually, what do I want to go there for? Do I want to go there, or do I just think I do? I think it's great having those dreams, but I'll tell you what to do, right? Sit with them for a bit and play it out. Play it out what it's like, and then don't just say, right, I want to do this, I want to do that, and then just go for it. What the fuck's that all about? Like, have a little bit of, like, do you know what? I'm quite happy with spending my weekends with the kids now.
Yeah.
I really I actually starting to like them. They're annoying kids, man.
Only
Oh,
now. Yeah, I'm an uncle to 5 nieces and nephews, and I joke often that I've always wanted to be a father and have a family, and I've been an uncle now for 6 years, and it's been very eye opening.
yeah, just stay as an uncle, man. Just stay as an uncle.
Yeah,
Then you can just sort of give
it's
them back.
it's a nice process because you get to enjoy it, and then when the meltdowns start to occur, you get to hand them back over to your brother and let him deal with it.
That's it. They're also great kids for learning how to take portraits.
Yeah.
That's how I learned to take portraits. I just use my kids. And like literally, and I've shot portraits for, well, I've shot portraits. Vogue magazine and stuff like that. I've shot portraits for like musicians, bands, and stuff like that. Where I learned to take photographs was taking photographs of my kids
I love that.
from a young age
Yeah.
because they never do what you want them to do. The models are easy, but kids don't never do what you want. You have to bribe them, and then you learn all of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit biased in what I'm about to say. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly, and I think you're like a very pragmatic, wonderful person. This is going to be a little bit of a hard question, but you've had a very remarkable 20-year career so far, give or take a couple of years. You make incredible images. You're grounded. You've got your head in the right place. What, like, when you look at the rest of your life and how it unfolds, like, what is something that jumps out at you as like you're sitting on your deathbed, it's your last day, and you're like, yeah, I fucking nailed it. Like, what happens over the next 50 years, whatever, and what transpires over that time where you're like, whew, I did it every way I wanted to. Like, how do you keep that mindset going through it?
Well, yeah, 50 years is a long stretch, man.
Well, I'm just overestimating,
Yeah. Oh man, this is going to sound. I don't want to. When you hear them interviews and people he's just saying that for effect.
I don't get that
Yeah.
impression from you.
I genuinely don't care, mate.
Yeah.
I don't care. Honestly, don't. I don't think like that. My mind doesn't think like that. I don't get into it. Well, I'll make something up then. You know what I would like? I genuinely don't care. I don't care. I like. First of all, that's a concept for me that, like, we have this idea when we're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like my dad died at 33. Like, we have this. My best friend died quite young. Like, we have this idea when we're going to die. Yeah. It's going to be before that time you think.
Always.
Yeah, it will be before that. It won't be sitting by a swimming pool, yeah, with your new 22-year-old bride with like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Having won the Mega Millions, yeah.
24-pack of Stella, champagne, it won't be like that, will it? It won't be like that. But I don't know. I think, oh God, I've got to say something. I don't know. I just like. If I'm on my deathbed, a few of me kids there, that'll be cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I know it's a bit corny, but I don't care. Like this photography thing, like who's going to remember this in like even if you become like a Van Gogh, and then you become famous, like you won't be there.
Yeah, no.
I won't be there.
Yeah, it's funny.
I'm not religious. I'm not religious in any way. So as far as I'm concerned, when you go, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't really feel probably a bit more of an agnostic. I don't really think about that stuff. I don't think about it too much. It's not that I don't.
It's funny. For a long time, the last question I asked people on the podcast was like, "What do you believe in an afterlife?" I asked that question a lot for a lot of episodes.
I love all that though.
Yeah. It's funny. I think you reach a certain age, somewhere in your early 30s, where what happens with the rest of your life is more or less in your control, right? Like you've learned enough about life where you can create things for yourself that you want, whether that's a family, a career, whatever, right? You've learned enough in your 20s to be able to put those life experiences into practice. And for me, especially in these last 2 years, having gone through all of the shit that I've dealt with losing my job, fucking the pandemic, all of this stuff, it puts into perspective, like you said, when I'm checking out, the only thing that's going to matter is the people who are around me. And that's what you learn as you get older in life, because those are the only things that are irreplaceable. It's time with your family and time with your friends.
It's not that important, photography. It's not that important. But even if it is important, like, so for example, say you become the most famous photographer on the planet. Well, is that the most important thing though? I don't think it's still not the most important thing. It's photography. Yeah. We didn't even come up with it. Some geezer come up with this like a couple of 100 years ago. The thing with the afterlife thing, I don't not believe, like, you can't believe something you don't believe. I used to believe it as a kid. I just don't have no, like, I understand how people, like, I won't believe something out because I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
Just onto it because, but I absolutely, I've had some incredible, like, what you call it, like spiritual experiences of being connected,
mm-hmm.
like being, like, where I'm thinking, where almost like I know for sure that there's a certainty that when I die, it's all great. But there's not, Burt Lancaster is not sitting up there with a big beard waiting to welcome me.
Yeah.
I don't get up that stuff.
No, it's funny. My thought process ultimately, what it boils down to is like, I don't think there's like a big party in the sky somewhere and we're all just like having orgies in outer space or some shit, right? It's not like a party in a cloud, right? I think that when you look at like the way that life exists and like how we are here having this conversation over Zoom over billions of years of it's amazing. And to me, it's just like the sheer audacity that we exist is just too implausible to have not had some sort of divine intervention. All right, you could call it God, you could call it aliens, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't have the answer. I'm not going to pretend to. But to me, I think the thought that there wouldn't be anything when we die is just, it doesn't seem likely. I think there's just too much.
Well, yeah, if you go on mathematics, statistically, if it's mathematics, so my experience of my life, my experience is that, well, it's proven that it's not that I think the debate stops at like, is there a conscious afterlife?
Yeah.
Like I think it's scientifically proven, isn't it, that we don't just evaporate, we go back into, well, we merge with the force, don't we?
Yes.
We go back into, but in the film, it's a conscious thing. That's the thing. So, but I've had experiences where I've seen that who I think I am, Gary, like all of this thought stuff, is not actually that. How I live my day that's how I think I'm Gary. But that ultimately is not who I am anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be that because I can see all of that playing out. You can call it awareness or whatever it is. I see all of that playing out. You can't be what you can see. You can't be both. That's dualistic.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there's something else going on. But the person that's stringing all it, the thing that's coming up with all of this now to communicate that with you is thinking. And I can see all of that. I'm not that.
Mm-hmm.
The person that's saying I'm going to go on or I'm not going to go on, that won't be there anymore. It just won't be.
Yeah.
It will just won't be. So for me, that's a certainty. That's a certainty. But the thing is, like people say, oh, I'm not scared of the luck. I am scared of it. But I can't do anything about it.
Oh yeah, you're still gonna die.
I don't feel the need. I don't feel the need to evaporate, to get rid of all of that. I don't understand that. Like, the way that I feel is the way that I feel. I can't. There's nothing I can do about it. You can try. You can talk yourself out of it. Oh, when you die, but secretly, you just come up with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've seen someone else come up with it. Ooh. Like, these people are very good actors, man, as well. Like, these confident people. And also, there's a little glitch in the Matrix where they articulate their way through life and they make a few quid. So that's an authority as well. And then we believe everything they say.
Yeah.
They're all bullshitters as well.
Yeah. Well, anyone who pretends that they have answers to those kind of questions in life are inevitably lying, right? Until you die, you don't really know what the fuck happens. And I don't know anyone that has died and been like, yep, here's what happens. It's like, well, if you die and you come
You know,
back, I don't know how reliable that storytelling is.
we listen to these people say this stuff. Like, do you know one of my heroes of all time is John Lennon?
Oh, yeah, of
John
course.
Lennon. I wouldn't take a total bit of notice of anything that he said. He was a lunatic.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't a lunatic, was he? But
He was
he
just
had an ego, and he knew he was being listened to. You
yeah.
can't listen to something like that. I don't really listen to anybody with that sort of. But I even say at my workshop, and it's a tiny little workshop with like about the most I get in there is like 20 people. Yeah, like a tiny little workshop, and I always say at the beginning. And we're talking about photography, but there's a bit of life stuff in there. Yeah, there's a bit of life stuff. And I always say to them, by the way, I'm going to keep you on your toes. Don't believe what I'm saying. And in actual fact, I'll throw in a few lies just to trip you up. Like with photography, you should do this. You should. No, you've got to be your own. It's important to gather information, but man, look at the fucking state of the planet. Let's not get into that.
Well, I will say this, Gary.
Don't take any notice of that. They have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, we're fucked inevitably, but I will say the force is definitely strong with you. I've immensely enjoyed this conversation, and
Me too, mate.
I've got a super cheesy line. If you've been on my podcast, you're part of my family, and yeah, I'm just super thankful to have had this conversation with you. We're definitely going to be doing this again. I could talk to you for hours, but yeah, I'm super appreciative that you came on today, and just super thankful, Gary, and really wish you the best, and we'll definitely be talking soon.
You too, John. I loved it, mate. It was absolutely great, and I love.